welcome to the Yanagida Podcast. Woo, we got special guests today. We're at the Nisei Veteran Center. Guys, thank you guys for being here, Deidre.
Hey, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And before we actually started, behind the scenes, we got to see a little bit of your office. And got some manga.
She has the best office. She really does.
Yeah, I have the office that looks like I actually work for the preschool.
and quickly about the Nisei Veteran, this was only my second time here because this used to be an open.
Right. This used to be an open air pavilion. So downstairs we have our education center. We have our archives where we have over 200 collections of Maui's, Nisei, and some Sansei veterans.
Oh, wow.
And then on our campus outside, as you came in, we have our preschool and we have our adult daycare center. And this was a pavilion that we decided to close and make into this workshop space during COVID.
What inspired that to make this enclosed during COVID?
You know, we do so many programs here, and we were doing a lot of talk story events, and it was just a little too much for the downstairs exhibit space because that's supposed to be for exhibits. So we just wanted to have a big space for the community where we can do workshops, you know, like coming and talking about fitness.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know, we do everything from ikebana to ocha workshops and sushi making workshops.
And it's a lot more convenient to have the location here instead of going, oh, we're going to rent an area over there and then we'll have the workshop there, or we'll go rent someplace else. This way, we have a workshop, we're right here. We have movies, we're right here. We have people speaking, we're right here. So people know where to find us. It's easy.
We have great movies. We have great movies.
Yes.
Every second Saturday.
Every second Saturday.
Monthly movie matinee. They're free, and we have popcorn.
Oh, that's the pitch. Popcorn, I like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, and everyone's probably curious, how did you guys get started in Nisei? I mean, just off camera, I can feel you guys are so like passionate about everything going on. And how did you get started?
Well, Melanie's actually been here a lot longer than I have. She was with the organization before it even had a space.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, before it had a space.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've been with the organization since, you know, we didn't even have buildings yet. We were in, you know, garages, people's garages. We had office space in, you know, the Arizumi building and things like that. That's when I started as a volunteer.
Wow. Wait, so what year was that? Or just
early 2000s.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, early 2000s.
Early 2000s. And
So I came in 2016. I've loved every minute of it. I grew up in Japan, so I've always had an affinity toward the, Japanese American story, and they were looking for somebody, and I was lucky to be the one to move forward with the organization at that time, and I've been here ever since. So yeah.
You know, one thing I catches my attention anytime is when the Hatsuon for Japanese words. Hatsuon is pronunciation. It's on point. I was like, oh, there's something. It just adds. I was like, wait a minute, how is it so good? So you were raised in Japan?
Yeah. So my mother and my brother and I we moved to Japan when I was 11 back in the early 1980s. So my brother and I went to Japanese school on the island of Shikoku in a little town called Imabari. So we went to Japanese schools, had wonderful experiences, learned Japanese, and yeah.
So was it a culture shock when you came to? So after Japan, you were 11, and then how old were you when you moved?
I think I was about 15 when we
15.
moved back, and we lived in China for a little while. But it was definitely a culture shock coming back to the United States after living in Japan, and that's why I think Hawaii is so perfect, right? Because it is really that bridge between Japan and America, and you really feel at home here, with an Asian mindset. So it's great to call Hawaii home.
So mainland Hawaii. And like, what keeps you still going today? Because I know that was 2016, so 7 years ago. And what keeps you guys going today?
Well, for me, I mean, I think it's the stories, the values upon which, the men and their families served and sacrificed so much. And, our mission is to inspire people to find the hero within themselves through the legacy of the Nisei veterans. And I have some great stories to share. But I will, I'll turn it over to Melanie because,
Well,
her story was different.
It's a little similar though. But I was lucky when I came in, we still had a lot of the veterans. So I was able to meet a lot of them. And my biggest fortunate thing was meeting Hiroshi Arizumi from Arizumi Brothers. They constructed this and everything. Hiroshi was an amazing veteran. He was an amazing person. He was the sweetest person. And he and I hit it off right off the bat. And he would take me to these events, or I would go as part of the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, and he would introduce me around to all of these other veterans. So I was able to hear a lot of these stories firsthand. When they tell you that they spent part of the war driving cars on the Autobahn because there was malaria and they couldn't rejoin their unit. I got to hear all of these stories about walking along the Vosges Mountains in the dark with only a lit cigarette so that the Germans wouldn't see them, but the trucks behind them could. So they could follow the soldiers. And I got to hear all of these stories firsthand. And my whole thing is, this is why I'm here, to share these stories.
Especially now, I mean, these stories have to be shared. I mean, they're just amazing stories that are as relevant today. The lessons that we learn from the stories are as relevant today as they were, 80 some years ago. So
what is the story that just pops top of mind? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot.
Well, go ahead. No, go ahead.
You can go.
I was just going to say, when I first joined the organization, there was a woman that came in, and she was, I think at that time she was in her late 90s.
Yeah.
And she was here from the Big Island, and she had actually been visiting a friend at Maui Adult Daycare Center. So, but she just decided to stop by downstairs, and she came in and she told us that her brother had served, but was killed in action during World War II. And Melanie asked her last name, and she said what the name was. And Melanie said, I think we have a box of your brother's items. So she brought it out, and inside there were, a posthumous Purple Heart, letter from President Truman. And then, I gotta say, she looked at these postcards and she turned them around and said, Iris, my name is Iris. These postcards were written to her and addressed to her when she was a little girl from her brother. The parents never showed them to her, probably because he was killed in action and they didn't want her to feel badly about that. So she read them for the first time in her whole life downstairs on this arbitrary Tuesday afternoon at the age of 97 or 98. And I mean, truly, there was not a dry eye in the center that afternoon. And, it was just so amazing to be a part of that and to be a part of that closure for her. And there are so many stories like that, but that was definitely one that stuck with me. And just to see the expression on her face when she saw her name and then when she read the letters. Yeah, so that is definitely one that sticks with me, which was a post-war story.
Yeah,
definitely.
She was 97?
She was 97 at the time. The first time she ever saw them.
think mine happened maybe not quite 10 years ago. The Okinawan Prefectural Museum was doing an exhibit on peace. It's a peace museum. And so they were doing this really big exhibit on peace, and they wanted to speak with Nisei, who had been in the Battle of Okinawa. And we had a few left still with us, and so we connected them. And most of the men didn't want, because the Battle of Okinawa was another one of those really, I mean, there's no good battles. There are just no good battles. But that one was especially brutal. And it wasn't just the soldiers who got caught in the front crossfire, it was the Okinawan people. And so a lot of our guys are going, oh, we do not want to relive that. We just don't want to. And finally, one of our guys from the Military Intelligence Service, who was also in his 90s at the time, stepped up and said, okay. Then, the Okinawan Peace Museum came, the people came and spoke with him and finally convinced him that they didn't want to talk about the brutality of the war or anything. They wanted to talk about, his experience, which is not going to be pleasant anyway, but they were going to focus on peace. What came out of all of this? And so he finally agreed to the interview. So fast forward to the day that they're doing the interview, they did it downstairs in the education center. There was an entire film crew, and this soldier and his family, his wife, his children, his grandchildren. And the interviewers from the Peace Museum started asking him questions about what he experienced. And he immediately broke down crying and started talking about, they would hear rustling at night, and the American soldiers would think they were the Japanese soldiers. The Japanese soldiers would think it was the American soldiers, and there would be crossfire. The next morning, it would be dawn and civilians, men, women, children. They had come out of the caves and everything to try and look for food. He remembered people jumping off cliffs to escape, to save themselves. He remembered so many just absolutely horrible things. And this is why he never wanted to recount his experience. And this was the very first time his family had heard any of this. So again, not a dry eye. I'm sitting there blubbering like a baby. His entire family, everybody, we're all just down there on camera crying and crying and crying because his memories were still so vivid and just horrible. And that was his experience in the war.
And he was also the one, we did a panel discussion with some of the former veterans.
MIS, yeah.
With the Military Intelligence Service veterans. And at the end, I think it was Yukile Sugimura had asked him, what is your message to that next generation? And he said, war is hell.
Mm-hmm.
Be nice to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go to war.
Mm-hmm.
It's awful. I think that message of what you want to call it, peace, or just, no more war, was one that was really, really resonated with so many of our veterans who came back. Just, it was awful. Don't
all
do
of
it.
Them would say that.
Peace.
No wars.
No war. No war.
We shouldn't have war. Because they were there, and they were there with their friends and family. That was the thing about the Nisei units.
Right.
Not like now where, if you go in, you'll be put in a unit, you may not know anyone from that unit. This is World War II. They were in the same unit as their family members, as their friends, everybody they went to school with. They had cousins. They knew everyone. Especially for the 100th, because the 100th came from Hawaii.
Yeah, they were all
Hawaii. Friends and family. And to watch, some of our guys, when we interviewed them, they say that the hardest thing was to watch my friends die.
Like for people curious, and I'm curious myself too, like, for everybody being bundled up like that for Nisei, was there a legitimate reason for that? That's usually not heard of.
When the 100th Infantry Battalion was created, the actual name of the unit was the 100th Infantry Battalion Separate. They were kept separate from everyone else because they were Japanese American.
Wow.
So there were not a lot of other units out there of other nationalities who were willing to be with this Japanese American unit.
And at that time, so many of their family members, especially on the mainland, but also in Hawaii, were in internment camps.
Yeah, they were all incarcerated.
Yeah, they were incarcerated in internment camps.
That's not talked about really much either.
You know, little by little. I mean, I think
it's very slow in coming out, but it's starting.
You know, and we had internment camps here on Maui and throughout the state. And we had Maui individuals who were interned both in Hawaii and then on the mainland. So it's a very deep, deep history, and there's so much that people don't know, and there is a push to share this in curriculum, and there are organizations that are doing that. But so that's one of the things that we want to do, is make sure that people know this history, can learn from the history, and so
it's why we're here.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with schools and school groups.
It's so crazy because my late grandfather, on the other hand, was forced to conscript into the Japanese military because it was military dictatorship. And if they didn't, they would get sent to prison. And so they would round up all the 15, 16-year-old boys. He was 15 at the time. The only reason why he survived in the neighborhood was because he was able to cook. So he had a knack for cooking, and so he didn't have to go on the battleships, which all ended up sinking. And there are stories that I never got to hear from him. He didn't want to share it. And I can't imagine, because that's the other side. And my grandfather would tell me, don't take it for granted. You're born this era with this circumstances. Because if you were born at a different time, you and your parents would have been locked up.
Yeah.
And you, being a Nisei, would go to war.
Yeah.
And when you're younger, as a teenager, it's like we don't understand as much. And I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and to think, the 442 when they did the regimental combat team, the guys were volunteering out of high school. So you're talking about teenagers, you're talking about 17, 18, and teenagers, and they're going to war.
And there are stories about families who were here but then sent one son back to Japan, the Kibe, or so they were studied in Japan. But I'm going to take a drink of water here. But you can talk more about how one brother served here.
Yeah, one brother is in the American Army, but the brother that was studying in Japan is now in the Imperial Army. Yep. So you've got brothers on opposite sides of the war. And there are stories, I haven't heard any personally, but there are stories of brothers meeting on the battlefield.
I think Midnight in Broad Daylight, too.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a great book.
Yeah.
Midnight in Broad Daylight. It was written by an author,
Pamela Rotner Sakamoto.
She's a teacher at Punahou.
Oh, yeah?
And it's a true story.
Pamela Rotner Sakamoto.
And it's called Midnight in Broad Daylight, and it's a true story. It's an amazing book, and it speaks to that whole family and how the whole family was impacted. So there was part of the family moved back to Hiroshima. So one of the boys was with the Imperial Army, and one of the daughters ended up in Hiroshima, and then the bomb was dropped, and then our family became hibakusha. So it's a very good, but very emotional story. So if anyone is interested, they should definitely get it and read it.
Wow. And title of the book one more time?
Midnight in
Midnight
Broad
in
Daylight.
Wow. Even the title says it.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah.
but there one more story.
Oh.
There was the one story of he was not from Maui, he was from Oahu, but he was serving in the military intelligence. He was part of the Battle of Okinawa. He was interviewing prisoners of war.
Oh.
And here are two Imperial Japanese soldiers. They're caught by the American soldiers, so they're prisoners. They're fearing for their lives. They don't want to talk. They're just terrified. And the American soldier finally, after speaking to them in Japanese, because the MIS guys spoke Japanese, finally came out and said, "Don't you recognize me?" And they're looking at him like, huh? And he goes, "You don't recognize your classmate?" He had gone to Okinawa when he was young for school. They had been classmates in school, and he recognized these two soldiers. They're
Wow.
grown now, of course, all of them, but he recognized them as his classmates.
Oh.
And he said that they all just broke down crying. He gave them cigarettes. He assured them that we were not going to do anything horrible to them. That, yes, they were American prisoners now, but we weren't going to torture them. We weren't going to kill them. We weren't going to do anything that they thought we would.
Oh,
Yeah, so I mean,
This is
it's so heavy, you know.
Yeah.
But
I like this. This is like so enlightening.
yeah,
Because it's like we need to know this. I mean, because what would you want to say to, I guess, like the youth of today, like with what you guys are doing? This, to me, it's very important. There's a lot of people, just only 80, 90 years ago.
yeah.
Right.
It's not that long ago.
Right.
It
It's like our
really isn't.
grandparents.
In one way, it's very long ago, but really, in the scope of everything, it's not. It was, like you said, 80 years ago, and we got to, number one, you have to learn this history about what these men did, and how they to this day stand as the most highly decorated unit in the American military, for their size and length of service, for what they did. And what they did was just amazing, and they really had at their core those values of perseverance and loyalty, and the gambari, and not giving up, and okage-sama de, and because of you I am, and making sure that it was all for the future, kodomo no tameni. And and then they came home. They came home to Hawaii, and they really shaped our political landscape. You look at Daniel Inouye, Sparky Matsunaga. They became politicians and teachers and business owners, and they really helped create what we call Hawaii today. They were very involved with statehood. So they came back and they gave back to the community. And I had said earlier, they adopted a motto of continuing service. So to make things better, and on every island, they did things, but for us, it was the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, where we have an intergenerational center. We have the preschool, the adult daycare center, and it's all about not forgetting the past, but also contributing to the future.
Speaking of the future, there must be kids or grandparents of these
Yes.
people
Yes.
involved today?
Very involved. Many of our board members are legacy family members.
Well, our parent organization they're known as Maui Sons and Daughters of the Nisei Veterans. And that's exactly who they are. They're the sons and daughters of these soldiers. And they were the ones who came together to create the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center. And they still support us to this day.
They're amazing.
They still come and help us do events and everything else.
Leonard Oka.
Well, we're his brainchild.
We are.
This was Leonard Oka's.
Oka.
Yeah. It was his idea.
He wanted to have a place to put his father's items so that his son would have a place to come and see them.
Mm-hmm. And then he would learn, the son would learn that Leonard's dad served and Leonard's wife's dad served. So both sides of the son's family, both grandpas served. So Leonard wanted something for him. And as he put that idea out there, other sons and daughters went, that's a really great idea, because my kids or this other person's kids, and it started just kind of getting big from there. And then they talked to Hiroshi Arizumi, who of course was in the he was in the 442nd. He was in the 232 engineer. He was a combat engineer.
Combat engineer.
Yeah. He had a great story. I have a Hiroshi Arizumi story. We had a group of Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts come one evening, and we had Hiroshi as the speaker. And so he was telling them about being an engineer. And, during World War II, what do you do? Well, they were the ones that would lay down track, make roadways so that the trucks could come, so that the tanks could come, so that even soldiers would be able to get through. They were also the ones that would put up communications. And one of his great stories is that, when they were new at this, they'd be out there going, oh, why are we putting the wires down here? We should just put the wires up. They start trying to string wires, and then they get fired on by the enemy. And they're like, oh, that's why we're not putting wires up in trees and on posts and things like, okay, back down there. And another one where he was explaining how they would clear for roadways. It's like, okay, well, you could, dig it up or anything, but, we were combat engineers. They'd just blow it up. They'd just set dynamite and go,
wow.
And one of the most dangerous things that they would do, and I still remember Hiroshi talking about this, is that when they would cross rivers or things like any body of water, they would be out front, the combat engineers, and they would go through the water first, and they'd be poking in the mud with their bayonets, looking for mine. Yeah. How's that for a way to look for a mine? Yeah. Click, boom. Okay, well, we found one.
Wow.
But that was a Hiroshi Arizumi story as well.
Wow.
Now you know why he was my buddy.
Yeah.
He was amazing.
I'm curious, with all the stories that you guys have heard over the years, what do you guys feel are maybe 2 or 3 things that they would want to leave on, like a message?
I definitely think the message of no war. No war. You know. And I don't know that this is a message necessarily that they want to share, but how connected we all are. So we have a sennin body over there on the table, and it's a 1,000-stitch belt. And it was, this one was done by women in the plantation camp. So every woman would do 1 French knot. And unless you were Year of the Tiger, and if you were Year of the Tiger, then the girl would do however many stitches was her age. So if she was 16, she would do 16 stitches on every sennin body. And the sennin body were given to the men as a form of good luck, and they would wear it under their uniform. So we had very lucky to have 4 in our collection. And we had a woman from the plantation camp come by to the exhibit one day, and she said, I remember these. It was awful. She said, I was Year of the Tiger, so I would have to do so many of these every day, and my fingers would be bleeding at the end of the day. But then we also have a lot of groups come in from Japan, and a Japanese group saw the sennin body, and they said, you must have taken this from one of our soldiers. And we said, no, because we also had this custom. So it's a Japanese custom, but it was, followed on by the Issei the immigrants who came to Hawaii, who then, made it for their sons. So, we are also connected. And, you talk about the families where one son is from here fighting against, this son who was in the Japanese army. And, we're all human beings. And we might have different ways of thinking, but, in the end, we're just all living on this earth. We're all humans. And I think it goes back to that message of, let's live in peace together, no wars. But I think that's definitely one of the messages. And
yeah,
there's some.
That was the main one that they would always, whenever we would have them give a talk, they would always seem to come to that at the very end, that we need peace. We need peace. No more wars, because they lived through this.
Yeah.
They saw their friends die. They saw their family die. We have, stories like the Ajitomi brothers who were from Lahaina. The older brother, he was, I can't remember, I think he was in France when he heard that his younger brother had been killed in action. And his first thought was, he was so sad thinking that his brother died alone on a hill, crying for their mother. A year later, the older brother got killed in action. So neither brother came home.
No war.
No war.
No
I think
war.
that's the
No
big
war.
Aligning message.
That is the aligning message. And yeah.
And then now if we take a flip for the folks that came back, and because it seems that they're so appreciative of life and all, and just from stuff I've read and
Yes.
watched, what kind of message would they say?
I think we still have the opportunity to have a few of our veterans stop by every now and then, and they don't necessarily dwell on the past, and they had good times too. They have some really fun,
there's some really funny stories.
Funny stories also, some which can't even be told. They're so funny.
But
not without being highly censored.
Right. But they did so much. They came back, and while they remembered what happened, they also pushed forward.
And that was some. This is why they didn't talk about it when they came home. Like how you say your grandpa didn't talk about the war. None of the guys wanted to talk about it. They just didn't. They came back and decided, okay, that part of my life is done. Let's move forward. So they went to school, or they started their families, or they started businesses. Like Hiroshi says in his interview, we all had some kind of a plan.
Yeah.
They talked about what they would do at the end of the war. They all had a plan, because the war would be over. They weren't going to dwell on it. They were going to move forward. And they did.
And you look at a lot of like Maui businesses, Tasty Crust.
Oh yeah,
Seiki Machine Works. Of course, our
Pukalani Super Red, Arizumi Brothers,
TJ's Warehouse.
Let's see, Napa Auto Parts, the Fujinakas, the Hanadas, the service stations.
That's right.
They all
rentals.
came from. They all stemmed from Nisei veterans.
Yeah. And many more
family members
that were
like that. There's many of them. These are just off the top of our heads.
Yeah.
Using that for good and looking forward. And
right.
That's all right.
So, we always know that no matter what we do, whether we do workshops or, author signings or whatever it is, we're always moving forward, but at our foundation is always the archives. It's always, these items here, these stories that we share with the greater public. So we never forget why we are here, but we also make sure to, move forward and do other things as well, including, now we have an exchange program with a kindergarten in Japan. So they send students over once a year to learn English and Hawaiian, and they're a little too young because they're kindergartners and first grade to learn too much about the war. But they're here on campus and they do homestays, and so it's just
Beautiful thing.
it is a beautiful thing.
And for people wondering, you're probably looking at this flag.
Yes.
You're probably like, wait, so Jojo will pop up the flag
Okay.
on the screen.
This came from the family of a soldier who was killed in action. He was, it was just a few days after Thanksgiving in 1943 in Italy. He got caught in a Nebelwerfer grenade, which is called a screaming Mimi. And what it is it just jumps up and goes boom. And he unfortunately mortally wounded him. But one of the really interesting things about this flag is that because it's from 1943, there are 48 stars, because this is before Alaska and Hawaii became states. So the family gave this to us. They donated it to us in honor of their lost soldier.
I've never seen it until today.
A 48 star.
Yeah. We have a massive treasures.
Oh yeah, our archive downstairs is absolutely amazing. We've been so fortunate to have had the veterans with us at first, and they gave us so much of their own memorabilia. And sadly, as we started losing them, the families decided to also donate the memorabilia, because we have a climate controlled room downstairs for all to really take care of all of this. So it will stay. It's better than being in a garbage bag in the back of the garage kind of a thing, or way stuck in a box in the back of a closet. It's protected. It's in it's in an area where it will be for a very long time, and it'll stay in excellent condition. The other thing about our archive is that we rotate things into our exhibit room. So if you donate something to us that's some kind of memorabilia, it's not going to be like you kept it in your garage. It's not going to be hidden away. At some point in time, it will come out and people will get to share in your veteran story.
And right now we're working to digitize it.
Yes.
Digitize the archives, which is a huge project that Melanie is spearheading. But that way, people from across the globe will be able to see it online. Up until now, people have had to come in, but this way we can have a broader audience. So we're really excited about that. And there are a lot of old movie fanatics who would love to see the signed Van Johnson script of the original 1950 movie of Gopher Broke. Yes. I think we also had the original invitation.
We have the invitation to the
movie screening.
The premiere in Hollywood.
Yeah. So lots of fun stuff.
Oh my gosh. And so what's something, and last couple questions, what is something that you guys are looking forward to in 2024?
Definitely, we're very excited about the digitizing the archives. That is a project that we've been talking about for a while, and we have wonderful support from the county, as well as a lot of private donors who have allowed us to purchase the equipment and the software necessary to digitize it and get it up online. We're also really excited about the various programs we have coming up for the new year. And we encourage everyone to check out our website at nvmc.org to see, what's coming up. Everything from movies to workshops to perhaps we can get Justin Yanagida and his group in here to do something as well. I know we're working on that. So I'm excited about that.
Well, with me, it's the digitization.
Yeah.
Just because it was a kind of a passion project of mine. I've wanted to do this since forever. And because I want to get the newer generations, our younger generations. We've got to digitize because they don't have time, and there's just too much involved coming here. I would love to have everyone come and visit the exhibit. I enjoy talking to people and having them come through there, but it's just not feasible for a lot of people. So to get it online and have them be able to look at it, another project that I've been working on forever is just collecting information on all of our veterans, because we don't really have an accurate number of how many Maui County veterans Nisei served. But to date, I have files on about 1,100. Yeah, 1,100 from Maui County. Nisei. And in there, we have 2 women. There were 2 women. They were Women's Air Corps. One was Alice Kono from Molokai, and another one was, I wish I could remember her name. It just slipped my mind, but she was from Hana.
Hana.
Yeah.
And I want to ask this last question because this conversation took so many amazing turns and stories, and what is something that when people are watching and hearing about the Nisei veteran for the first time, what is something that you would want them to know about?
About the center itself? I think it's a place for everyone. These were Japanese American men and women, but these stories are uniquely American. You don't have to have anyone who served in World War II or any conflict. You don't have to be Japanese American. Everybody is welcome here because like I said, these stories are uniquely American stories, and we welcome everybody to, come in and see the exhibits, check out the archives, eventually online, and be part of our ohana here. Because we're here for the community, and we are supported by the community, and we couldn't do it without them. So, but I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, the only thing I can think of is, as we get the community in here, the other really fun thing is that we'll start talking to people who maybe they're first time visitors or something, and we always find connections. You always find connections, even if they're not Japanese American. Grandpa served in the war, uncle served in the war. Everybody has some kind of a connection. And it makes the world a very small place.
And that's Hawaii.
That is Hawaii.
Yeah.
That is Hawaii. Yeah. So please come.
This is super random, but I did a little pilot episode it was called The Man in the High Castle.
Oh, yes.
It's if Japan and Germany took over the
world. Right.
And I was in the pilot in the first episode as a Japanese imperial soldier.
Oh my goodness.
And then I'll pop up the photo here.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's you.
I'll pop it up. It was I remember my grandfather was telling me the same thing of try not to, because there was a time when I was young, military, war, this and that, and stuff like that. When I was 16, 17, 18, going to GROTC, high school, all this stuff, I was like, went to the military. And it was actually my grandfather that stopped me. Unless you really feel compelled to, no. But he just said he's seen so many stuff, right. His friends, all this,
Yep.
And I can't imagine, and that's why I find so much value, and I know people are going to value the story shared, and looking forward to the future. Mirai wa akarui.
So, zehi.
Well, thank you guys so much. And,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Like, comment, subscribe. Oh, lastly, where can they find you, folks? I know the website?
Website,
Yep.
nvmc.org. And we have a really active social media, so Instagram, Facebook, and we also have all of our previous talks and things like that are on our YouTube channel. So
Okay.
Nisei Veterans Memorial Center YouTube. So check it out. Don't be a stranger, and hope you come by.
All right, guys. Thank you, guys.